Thank you, Adrian. Thank you, the team, for inviting me to speak at the LED Summit 2021 in a great facility, in the Samsung facility. So it's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to see everyone in person, as other people have said. It's been a long time. And, my topic that I've been asked to talk around is retail reimagined. Now, that's a huge subject, so really I'm going to get into more around retail and the physical stores than the whole subject of retail reimagined, and how retail is reinventing itself, repositioning itself, more than just a shopping medium. If I may, just to begin with, just a short sales pitch on who I am and who YCD are. I think Adrian put it eloquently just a couple of weeks ago on a shorter video. We call ourselves veterans of the industry. So we've been in and around, delivering visual experiences, digital signage networks for over 20 years. As an organization, we have a digital signage CMS, experiential software platform. You've probably heard of us and the platform called Scenario. And typically, this is in high visibility, high stakes, and high impact experiences. So anything from driving huge LED displays in places like Times Square and other cities around the world, to big retail rollouts, experience centers, visitor centers. But as we've seen also a shift in technology, YCD and scenarios in lots of other aspects like airports and in corporate communications and lobbies and alike. There's some reasons why we get brought into kind of high visibility, high impact projects globally. And it's really around the software, as I said, scenario platform. So we take a software over a hardware approach. The software has its own toolkit, which means there's not lots of development when you're doing experiential deployments. Most of the things that happen, we've had experience of. And that software over hardware platform means also that the software is driving big flagship stores across the world. Other things within the software are things like pixel mapping, synchronization, playback of any content, any K content through the software, minimizing, and I don't mean to downturn any of the hardware manufacturers, but downturning the need for lots of hardware in between. In terms of our reach, you can see we're dotted around the road, around the world, but of course we're a software house, so we really do work closely with our partners, whether they be AV integrators, creative agencies, and different partners, IT solution companies, because we're focused on the software and we rely on them to deploy and help us deploy the projects. Anyhow, that's just a little bit about us and who we are, and really probably now it's time to get into the meat of the project and the subject that I'd like to talk to you about. So the recent evolution of the physical retail store. And as I said, it's really going to take a form of myself talking around how they're reinventing and repositioning themselves. But what I'd like to do is share probably the conversations that I've had over the last year to 18 months with retailers about what does that mean. And what I've seen in some of those conversations is around retailers looking at these visitor centers, experiential centers, corporate lobbies, and seeing how the consumers or their clients are engaging. They want to see how they can move that on within a retail store. So what are the drivers around this? There's a lot of retail disruption, there's a lot of change, there's a lot of transition that's going on. And I think it's not only from a technical perspective, so pixel pitches are getting finer, not only from a commercial perspective, where we know that the cost between LCD and LED is bridging the gap, but there's lots of other factors pre-COVID, during COVID, and post-COVID, I'm sure, in terms of disruption and change. So if we think about what's been going on over the last year, a lot of retailers, I will say, have just been kind of getting by with their digital signage and their visual experiences within their locations. So they've been putting in, kind of a traffic light system to let us in and out. They've maybe had some kiosks for wayfinding and directional signage across the outlet or the retail store. But they're kind of one-off. often. They're one-off purchases or are not part of a larger digital signage strategy. The conversations that we've been experiencing as a company is that we're going to see some companies just do that and just get by. But other companies and retailers are stepping back and looking at that whole digital signage and visual communications strategy as a whole. So how can they utilize some of these investments they've taken into? So I suppose the message is here that retailers are looking, and the conversation I've had, are looking how they adopt and adapt to thrive, really, in the new world as things happen. And I think it's arguably to say digital signage is as valuable as ever it has been. There's a real play within the retail market. You know, a lot of us are thinking that we've seen a lot of downturn in retailers, and we've seen retailers close stores, but we've seen other ones thrive. We've seen supermarkets, DIY stores. There's a lot going on within retail. So they need to adapt or risk failure. I didn't want to use the word adapt or die, but some will. And they must do this. They must entice customers into their physical stores, create immersive but safe environments, so keeping in mind about the actual work environment and the retail outlet environment completely. And visual engagement is a key to their customer experience. It's part of that journey. Some of the conversations I've had and questions have come up is a physical store still required today? Is it actually required? There's been a huge increase on online and one-stop shopping habits, click and collect, curbside in the US, however you want to talk about it. But again, that appears to be opportunities with digital signage and visual experiences and LED. You know, people still will go into areas to actually pick up things. So there's a journey and an engagement with a customer through that piece. And the reality is, although these figures are pre-COVID, 80% plus sales are still done in physical stores. Now that's going to drop a bit. Obviously, we're in a pandemic, or coming out of a pandemic here in the UK. But that's still going to be a huge number and a huge percentage of purchases done within the physical store. So there is a focus from retailers about what do they do with their physical stores, how do they design them, and not just the flagships, and where does digital signage, visual experiences play a part in that. So as I said, I believe, and I think many of us think, yes, there is a need for physical stores still. We're seeing a lot of different retailers adapt. So I've named a few here. Amazon are set to open 30 stores in the UK over the next couple of years in terms of their frictionless supermarkets. There's also early discussions going with Amazon about experience and experiential stores, dotted around flagship locations across the world. Nike have experienced a drop in revenues over the last 18 months, but I'm fully aware of locations in the Middle East and in Dubai where they've opened some very highbrow shops and retail outlets, and they're also looking at 200 small format stores across the globe. So again, it's about this adopting and adapting to change. There needs to be a reason to give a shopper to want to engage, and I think that the retailers are looking at this more and more than ever. So again, I'm just relaying more conversations that I'm having with retailers. What does this mean, though, in terms of the retail translation? I think we heard in some other presentations that retailers are looking at how do we link both the online and the physical in-store experience. So to give you an example of a retailer that I'm talking to currently, who is purely an online retailer. However, they're looking at placing in the high street or in outlets or out-of-town areas, stores and retail shops, and they're going to be these, you can't exactly buy from that physical store, but there's going to be experience centers. So retailers are looking at these different areas. It needs to be interactive, they need to be immersive experiences. I think these are some important things and some important trends. It needs to be integrated, it needs to be part of a bigger digital signage network. And the other thing it has to be is secure digital signage networks. We've touched a little bit as well on measurability, analytics, behavior trends, just like the websites kind of report back into HQ about what's going on within on the websites and on the internet. The same thing is being adopted in retail locations. And I know we've talked about for years that it can be very personalized. This doesn't have to be personalized. This can be demographic information, more generic information that's fed back. And then from store to store, content can be adjusted. The other piece I've seen is physical stores have had much more involvement. They've always had involvement from marketing, but there's much more involvement from marketing generally. And that's where we start to see these experiential stores. So retail reimagined. We've looked at kind of the why retailers have been looking at adapting and making changes. But there's also some guiding kind of principles or guiding factors, we could call them, as they look at things. And again, I think we've heard some of these during the presentations this morning. So the first one is around attracting. A store's external signage must be inviting. It must be distinctive. It must be interesting to someone to have a call of action to actually want to go into that location. From a digital signage perspective and experience, we can create irregular shaped display layouts, we can create mosaic screens, we can have real-time data into those window frames, we can have social media, interaction, but it is looking for that call to action. Why should a client or a customer walk into that store? It's a very expensive part of a retail store is the window. Once into that location, it's really about engaging with the client and taking them through a customer journey. So it's one thing having eye-watering, high-resolution wow video and content playing, but also it's need to understand that some clients want autonomy. They just want to go and look at product selectors. They don't want to be bothered by an assistant within the store. They want to be in control of what they're doing. So it needs to be interactive communication. Safety is obviously prime right now. So there needs to be safety messages across those stores. Informational, directional, as we said, wayfinding. These are all other areas once they're in the store. And then linking the store to customer service as well as just being a retail outlet or retail shop. And then finally, probably the third guiding principle that I'm hearing a lot about is obviously still promotion. Originally it was all about sale items, but also brands are looking at how they immerse their customers into the brand culture. How are they bringing in sustainability? How are they communicating their values as a retailer? I think generations now look at what's behind companies rather than just the product. What are their values? So again, it's communicating with those people. Obviously, once they're in, you can do targeted messaging, offer in-store promotions, product launches, special events, all the things that we, as an industry, we're all very aware of that you can do within the store itself. So, kind of said I looked a bit about the why and a little bit about the how, but also I'd like to share with you some kind of mini case studies of some clients that we work with and what they've done over the last couple of years in terms of immersive experiential solutions within their retail outlets. The first one I'd like to share with you is T-Mobile and their signature stores across the US. And T-Mobile kind of have a brief and a focus around, reinforcing that brand, but also a big focus on regionality. So making people within those cities really want to come and visit that store and pull them off of the main street there. So I'm going to play a short video. So lots going on there. You know, T-Mobile take a real immersive approach to their digital signage and their strategy around it. So they kind of throw almost the kitchen sink in terms of technology of that, but they maintain this regionality. So for example, you might have seen in the video, there's a interactive kiosk within the store and playing on a loop of content, but once someone engages with that, they can take photos with different backgrounds, engage with that, give historical information, and it's called a selfie shower. So when they come out of the actual store, some minutes later, in Times Square, on arguably, I think maybe it's the largest LED in Times Square, at the Marriott Marquis, they have their selfie pictures in that area. So it's kind of a fun thing, so it's a kind of a brand building thing, but they look for these unique experiences within their different locations. So here's a picture of another store in Las Vegas. Again, they've got wayfinding, virtual reality rooms, LED on the stairs, but also something in there from a regional perspective is interaction with stadium content. So also down the road is the T-Mobile Stadium in Las Vegas. So there's content information played in the actual store itself, what's coming up, information about what's happening, background history, and alike. So a lot going on within the store, but even if you look at the pictures in the top left-hand store, it doesn't look overly cluttered. So they've really taken a very good look at the actual design of that layout and of that store. Some other examples of T-Mobile are various cities across the US. The bottom left and bottom right are actually in Chicago. And this looks out onto Michigan Avenue, drawing people in with huge LED boards, but again, through regionality, talking about skyscrapers within the city. So having that kind of empathy with the customer potentially walking by and to draw them into that. Okay. So I'm now just going to move on to another example from Experience Center within Amazon itself. This is actually at their headquarters, and it's called the Amazon Sphere. So I wanted to show this small and short video and talk a little bit about Amazon and what they're doing within their HQ, because it just shows other immersive solutions and other things that we can talk to our clients about from a digital signage perspective. And what's really going on within there is there's a set of LED columns and totems, as you can see in the middle of here. There's LED content being played across the screens within the center. In this instance, it's all around plantation, information from a sustainability perspective. So it's really showing Amazon's credentials as a company. And as you can see, I think the next picture will show us better in the top left-hand corner. You sit by these columns and it gives you the effect of being in a sphere. And then we have spotlights beaming down, and when people tread on the spotlights, directional audio is playing. So it's really an example of a lot of things going on within a network and within a location from a digital science perspective in terms of integration with APIs and different sensors. Just some more pictures around Amazon in itself. Another example I wanted to share with you is Microsoft. And I think this takes us back to near the beginning of the presentation around retailers and companies and organizations looking at how they really adapt. And Microsoft, we've been working with Microsoft since 2009. They have around 85 different stores and different locations across the globe, and they're actually looking to close a number of them due to COVID. However, they're looking at experiential stores and experience centers in a number of different areas across the globe, and the flagships as well. And it's a good example of how retailers are adapting and the opportunities it gives us within the industry.
That's the new Microsoft flagship store. We hope you enjoyed it. Remember, you can head to Windows Central for more information. Thanks for watching. Take care, everybody.
So again, lots going on within that retail store. Lots of API, lots of zones, lots of dynamic content, e-gaming sections. But also, if you look at the top left and the top right, from the avenue or from the road view, you'll see that there's lots going on with LED now in terms of artist impressions. And again, just trying to draw people and attract people into that location. The store I'd like to talk a little bit more about is actually here in London. It's located on the corner of Oxford Street and Regent Street. And if you get the chance, please do go there. I believe it's open. And this really is 22,000 square feet, over 3 floors. It is LED from floor to ceiling. You can read here, there's 16 ultra high resolution LEDs. There's over 54 million pixels. So it really is the kind of the latest and greatest in terms of a retail store using LED. The entire store can be set up as one complete synchronized content canvas, or it can have zones and dynamic zones, auditorium, learning centers. There's also customer service. So there's integration with APIs around wait times, queue management, that type of thing. Also a big, heavy influence on the e-gaming market. So there's a lot of promotion around Xbox, e-gaming. They hold events there which are streamed out live across the world. And it's all being run through digital signage and digital signage CMSs. In terms of the content, as you can read, HTML5, alpha animation, very, very high playback NEK content. But as I say, if you get the chance, please go and see the store. And they are looking at, as I said earlier, about looking at their experience stores and bringing new experiences within there. This will be one that will probably be changing at some point later this year or next year as well. So it'd be good to see the before and after too. Again, just some areas of more of the content around this store. It's a very immersive actual store itself. That kind of brings me towards a close on my presentation, I think a takeaway that I've learned from talking to retailers over the last year or 18 months, and something to pass on, I'm sure you're having similar thoughts and conversations, that retail is certainly not dying. Retail is evolving, it is changing, and I think as an industry we need to work very closely with it. I think there's a major part for us to support the retail and the physical store. So thank you for your time and your attention, and I hope gave you some good value in terms of some experiences, the how and the why retail and physical stores are reimagining themselves and repositioning themselves.
Thank you, Dan. Have a round of applause. Okay, thank you. Have we rehearsed any dance routines?
Any what, sorry?
Dance routines?
Mask off. No, I don't think we did, no.
Okay, no. Later, maybe one day.
Yeah,
I'll get to dance for all of you. That was wonderful. A couple of questions from online. The Microsoft stores that you've done around the world, I've been to the opening of both of them, the one in New York several years ago and the one in London 2 years ago.
Yeah.
The big difference, I think you mentioned in your presentation, one was the latter one was all LED, whereas the previous one was pretty much all Samsung LCD. Yeah. Was it more difficult to build the one with LED, or is it no difference between what had been chosen?
There really wasn't a lot of difference. I mean, from a CMS perspective, we take a view of looking at the whole entire store as one complete canvas, whether that be LCD or LED, whatever it might be. So really from a content and a creation and an immersive from the creative team at Microsoft, there's no real difference.
Right, okay. So looking ahead at technology, if you think of just the roadmaps of those two flagship stores, I think, were they 4 or 5 years apart maybe in terms of?
Yeah, about that, yeah.
So who would have thought 4 years ago when you built the LCD walls with Samsung product, that 4 years later you'd build it all with LED? Difficult question coming up. Ready, Jenny? What would you think in 4 years' time? Are you thinking that far ahead to think, if we do a flagship store now, next one in let's say we choose one in Beijing or Shanghai or somewhere, in 4 years' time, what will that technology be?
Yeah, I think it is a difficult question. I don't think we really know what's coming down the line. We know that pixels and the picture's getting a lot finer. And
we'll ask Bob.
Yeah.
Jenny would say OLED, I think, but Bob would say, do you want to know? I wouldn't guess. So for those viewers at home who may not have heard that, Bob said he wouldn't guess. Yeah. But isn't that difficult for architects and store designers to figure out where we're going in the future?
Yeah, I think it is, because it takes a lot of time to go through this process. You know, as I said, the conversations I think that I've had over the last year, 18 months, a lot of this won't come true until 2 or 3 years out. So it's finding that merge between the thought process and the design process against the technology that's actually going to go into these stores and these locations. Right.
So you're obviously up on retail because the thing you've mentioned with the experience stuff, and we've seen it here today with Samsung. I think Samsung have been here many years with the Experience Center. They've got one in New York as well. For those of you in the meatpacking district, those of you who come to New York Digital Signage Week, they have the Samsung Experience store there as well. What about QR codes and interactivity? Jenny mentioned it earlier on. Have you seen lots of requests for that within what you've been putting out?
Yeah, and perhaps I should have alluded to some of that in the presentation, but within those conversations, we've been talking about the customer journey and what phases they go through. And I think there's a lot of thought process around a consumer buying something online, but maybe they're going for a click and collect or curbside, as we said in the US. But maybe go and click and collect in the store itself. So the kind of journey or customer journey could be, you go to the store, you get your red, yellow, green, or is there availability for me to go into that store? Mm-hmm. Once you go in that store, you then use your QR code, effectively, to say, I'm in the store, I'm ready to pick something up. And then from that point onwards, there's a customer journey of getting to till A or B or C, whatever it might be, to actually pay and pick up that store. And then what's the signage and what's the immersive experiences along that journey? Right. So they're definitely the conversations that are going on.
And you alluded to Amazon up on the wall as well. Here in the UK, Amazon opened probably 4 or 5 weeks ago. One of the first
frictionless stores.
Is it called a frictionless store? With very few staff. Does that change what we're looking at doing with the software and the LED and the design when there's no till staff?
I think the changes is around the content providers and the people within the retailers themselves about what messages do they actually want to convey to the client. And I think it also goes back to some of the things I talked about in terms of metrics and behavior and understanding what customers are coming into that store. And that might depend on what you're playing on the screens or whatever device it might be.
Brilliant. Okay, Dan, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.